Ex-Millionaires of Reddit. What made you lose all your money? My dad is an ex-millionaire. He's a freaking wizard at starting successful businesses. His problem is he can't let them go. He's the boss owner who never hires a manager that's not family because he just doesn't trust anyone else to run it. He drove $3 million companies into the ground because he couldn't keep up with his own success and refused to hire people to do it for him. My dad, not me. He made some really shrewd stock market investments after he retired. They were options on an oil refiner at a time when the USA had a real shortage of them. My dad had done a lot of research on this and studied the situation carefully. He got rich to the tune of maybe $2 million. He could have been set for life. My dad was already a really smart guy. He has a PhD in mathematics and was a highly respected big brain professional all the way back into the 1960s. However, he thought this took him to the next level. He bought a lot of newer options in the same company. I suggested to him that he diversify, put a bunch of money into something closer to an annuity or another conservative investment that would give him plenty of income forever. I told him if he did that, he would always be rich. Well, he is pretty far from that now. I haven't said a thing about that to him since he lost everything. I did what I could, at the time, to save him from himself. But who was I? It pains me to see how it played out for him. He did a lot of things right in life. He deserved better, but there's no deserve in securities investing. Morals of this story. 1. You aren't an investment genius after your first blockbuster win. You need a track record. 2. Diversify. Diversify. I can't second this hard enough. My mother-in-law received nearly $1 million in life insurance when my father-in-law passed away. She invested wisely, has lived off the money for the last 20 years, and still has about the same as she did initially. 2008 took about half of it, on paper, but she held on and it basically came right back. I watched a guy at a casino somehow get a loan against his house, about $200k, and lose it. He looked suicidal. Apparently he was already in almost $50k and thought he could win it back. I got hired there, and I would leave on Friday and return Monday, and see the same people in the same clothes, who pee and crap themselves and were still sitting at the blackjack table gambling. People like this are the reason hotel rooms in Vegas are so cheap. COVID. Built a business that was given a valuation of a few million back in January, but the industry is now down 80% and I'm doing all I can to avoid bankruptcy. First husband was making $1 million a year. He was enjoying life, spending frivolously, but bringing in enough that it didn't matter. We divorced, but amicably. No alimony, no child support. He just paid for whatever the kids needed. Then he got leukemia. He fought like heck for 3 years. The last 2 years were very expensive. It was worth it. Money won't make you happy, but the lack of it can destroy you. The kids and I can take comfort in knowing that truly, there was nothing else possible. His millions bought his kids 2 more years of dad, and I'm glad for him that he enjoyed his life while he could. His millions bought him 2 more years of dad. If you're American, then goddamn. Frick our healthcare system. This is heartbreaking. I work in finance and my team and I work with all very affluent clients. I've seen so many millionaires lose it all, not from investing in the markets, but from taxes, lifestyle and poor business decisions. Once had a client who was making $50k a month, but was spending $60k a month and perpetually dipping into his investments. There were months where payments bounced because he was living a lifestyle and always wanted more. My favorite investment advice: same car, same house, same spouse. Love it. Not me, but an acquaintance. He got caught not paying taxes and dealing in stolen goods. He spent time in federal prison and lost everything, including his wife. Crime does not always pay. Not me. My mom. My grandfather died and left everything to my mom. My father died and left everything to my mom. Mom always thought she was a smart gambler that would win, and as proof she won something like $25,000 in the lottery once and went out and bought a car. That just got her hooked. Good. When dad was alive, he didn't let her gamble. He kept it under control. After dad died, mom found a boyfriend, a former bookie who was a professional gambler. They used to like going to the Indian casinos where they subsequently squandered every single penny and more, as my sister told me that mom, after selling the big house for another $500,000 and buying a small little condo, has now taken out a home improvement loan against the condo for $50,000. No improvements were ever made. Casinos and lottery tickets. A cool million or two gone. We were close. Then the Great Recession hit. Lost 60% in 3 years. Just updated the balance sheet today. We're almost back. Who knows what will happen in the next 24 to 36 months though. The trick was don't sell but keep buying. I'm way ahead now. Not me, but my great grandfather started a candy company that serviced most of the Wyoming Valley in PA. My grandfather, his son, sold the company for upwards of $100 million. My mother and I are unsure of the full amount. He used the money to buy some land down in Florida, franchise a few Radio Shacks, and bought a lot of cars. During this time he divorced my grandmother and married another woman with children. Towards the end of his life, he reconnected with my mother and met me, but then developed brain cancer. He decided to cut his wife out of his will and give all of his money, still around $10 million, to my mother and her brother. Because he was bedridden, he had to have his lawyer email and print out the new will, which he would sign and mail out to the lawyer. But he asked his wife, that he was screwing over, to mail the new will, but for some reason it got lost. He died a few days later with my mother unaware the will change hadn't gone through. She paid for the funeral only to learn afterwards from her lawyer that the will was never changed. She went to confront her stepmother only to find out that she and her sons had already flown to Florida, taken the money and moved. She tried for a few years to sue, but due to state laws and lack of written evidence couldn't get the suit off the ground. And that's how my mother lost a multi-million-dollar inheritance and got stuck with a $50,000 funeral bill. Man, I never got the US system law, especially when it comes to heritage. For example, in civil law, even if you put in will your new wife, which without the will she would get 1/4 of all assets, and the kids from first wife 3/4 divided by how many they are. The kids from the first wife are protected by law and they are given a half of what they would get if the deceased wouldn't have left will. Hypothetical millionaire. I bought $100 worth of Bitcoin when they were about $1 each. I sold them when they were about $2.50 each and was so happy I made money from internet coins. As of the moment I am typing this, those coins would be worth $1,855,000. A common template for wealth loss is underestimating the role of luck in the initial wealth accumulation, and, as a result, taking irresponsible risks on new ventures and or maintaining lifestyles that overestimate future earning potential. I have seen this with some folks who made money in finance in the 80s and 90s. While extremely smart and hardworking, their path to tens or hundreds of millions of dollars were also pretty lucky. I got pretty close by selling my company to a bigger competitor, reinvested most of it since I had not much use for the money, but then got scammed for about $500,000 on buying some real estate. They smelled a newly rich kid from miles away. I still like to think I was worth $1 million at some brief point in time. Tell us about the scam. Not me, but my parents. Both smart people. Went to the best universities, graduated with bars and masters in architecture, went on to design very high-end apartments and homes all over Queensland, Australia, saved up enough to open a Michelin-style restaurant on the water. It was a hit. They became incredibly wealthy, and this is where money started to take a toll on them. They went all out, bought 2 penthouses in the same building and combined them into one. Owned and managed multiple high-end apartments all over the city. Bought multiple sports cars and even a yacht. Took my sister and I traveling all around the world. My life growing up was literally a model's Instagram page. But then one day a flood came. The restaurant went completely underwater and destroyed close to $1 million worth of wine, and not to mention the write-off on the kitchen. They were ruined. They had to sell everything just to cover the cost of the restaurant. They now live in a small apartment and are both still working over 70 to pay off all the loans they still owe. A word of warning: if you come into possession of a large sum of money, don't be stupid. And this is why, if you're in that position, you should get good insurance. Crypto millionaire. Still worth a lot. With my accounts about $850,000 today, I have a lot of XRP. But in 2017 I was worth about 3.5 million before the crash. Lowest was $300,000. I'm a hodler, so I don't day trade usually. My great grandparents were farmers and lived in North Dakota. In their prime, their team and them were absolutely great farmers. This along with some other factors made them super rich. For an example, they owned multiple planes and even had a hangar built to store them. They also had a really nice house. Not a mansion, but a really nice and large one. Well, it turns out they were really great at farming but not so much at paying taxes. My dad retired quite well off after a long and fulfilling career. 2 weeks after retirement, he got diagnosed with cancer. He had good insurance, so a lot of the treatment was covered. But turns out, living with cancer is costly in a lot of other ways. My mom became a full-time caregiver. I was stuck in grad school. My sister was still in undergrad. He was still on the hook for our education, while our income was zero. They needed someone to make fresh meals for them thrice a day because my dad kept getting infections if he ate food from outside, and my mother couldn't keep up. Also, he began having food sensitivities and it became expensive getting things he could stomach. Then he needed a counselor coming home a few times a week and that got expensive. And my sister moved back home to help care for him and then her commute cost extra. And I had to fly back around the world to see him a couple of times. Then he needed a trained caregiver part-time, and then full-time as he got worse. Then the surgery and then the medical items to keep his care going got really expensive when the good quality ones needed to be shipped from abroad. There was also all the special foods and supplements to boost his health and immunity. Long story short, he made it a little past the 2 years the doctors told us he would. But by the end of it, our finances had been significantly depleted. About a year in, I quit grad school and got a paying job. It was too much uncertainty financially to stay in grad school, especially since my sister was in a field that paid well only several years in. It worked out career-wise, so I don't regret it, and I was able to make enough to pay for his surgery when insurance was iffy. My sister had to refuse a couple of good jobs because they involved travel and she wanted to stay close by to take care of him. After he passed, we really had to overhaul our finances because some of his assets got tied up in litigation and cost us a lot in legal fees to transfer it to my mother's name. But thankfully my career began paying off and I could cover it all. No sweat. Eventually I saved enough to allow my sister to go to grad school, but for a few years, we were all living paycheck to paycheck. Mine, which was a shame given how diligently my father had saved and invested. We also finally got access to some of his assets and passive income streams, so now my mother has a modest income which she can live independently on. Divorce. I was a millionaire, got divorced which nearly sent me to insolvency, buckled down and worked my butt off and am a millionaire. Guys, don't underestimate the pernicious impact on net worth a bad divorce can have. PFT, you don't need to worry, no one on here is getting laid or married. I'd guess divorce, maybe fraud as well. Trust me, if you ever win the lotto, every person you have ever met, seems like, will show up with their hand out. If you want to test that, post on your social media that you won a lottery and see what happens. Then, let everyone know you won $5, and then drop everyone who asked for money. It doesn't even take a big win. I won 20k on a scratcher earlier this year and posted it. I had hundreds of people DMing me asking to give them money, loan them money, invest in their business. Like I had won millions. I got not even 15k after taxes. I have a rich uncle whose father owned a big chain of gas stations and some oil fields in Turkey. When the father died and the uncle took over, he didn't give any crap about the businesses. Was just partying and squandering everything. Like he bought basically a new luxury car every week, and boats. And every few months he would move into a new luxury home and buy 100% new furniture for it and just threw the old stuff away. After some years it all collapsed and he had to sell everything to a big US corp when hitting insolvency. Everyone in the family hates him now. Well, he was always an entitled C. But guess what? Despite being an unproductive loser, he managed to marry a bank director. She is rich as frick and continues to sponsor his stupid lifestyle. Basically his sugar mummy. For some people consequences just don't seem to exist. I mean, how can you go broke owning oil fields? It boggles my mind. And every time we are visiting family in Turkey and drive from Istanbul to the city where my family is coming from, we are passing like 20 gas stations that used to have our family's name on them. I was a flight attendant and once had a passenger in FC out of Vegas who looked distraught, handed me a 20 and said, "Please keep the bourbon coming." In flight, he just drank looking down. I asked how he was doing. He said he was trying to figure out how to tell his wife he had lost their home gambling. That was the moment I decided I would never participate in a town that made its money that way. Technically not me, but rather my family. My great-grandfather was born to a long line of vicars who had land, properties and farms. They were loaded. He was the rebel-only son and swore that he would break tradition. So he joined the army, and come World War II he was shipped off to fight for Britain. While overseas, he was captured and spent a few years in a POW camp where he subsequently found Jesus. After the war, he returned, joined the clergy, and, his father having died, gave every single penny to the goddamn church. Land, property and titles all, and lived off his vicar's salary. Obviously it was never mine to lose, but the knowledge that I could have been a lord with a horse and an affordable coke addiction really stings. My mom's second husband was a millionaire. Our family and his first family treated everything as one big family. When he got cancer he set a very intricate and fair system. Then he appointed 3 people to oversee any emergency changes to his estate. My mom, his first wife, and her second husband. As soon as he died they voted against my mother to throw away his whole plan and just give them themselves the money. 50-50. A lot of people who win the lottery will blow their money on big purchases, like a house or a yacht. Then they have no money left to pay the yearly costs of those items, and they lose everything. Invest all your money in a safe stocks, get a mortgage on a house, and chill the frick out if you win the lottery. My cousin was a big rapper in the 90s. When I say his name you probably know him or heard his music. It is still used today in the USA. Anyway, he became a millionaire really fast at 20 something years old after being a dishwasher. His manager made him sign bad contracts and almost all of the money after a year or two went to his manager and accountant. He is still doing okay producing some music in Los Angeles but not a millionaire anymore. My ex's mom, not me. She grew up as a trust fund kid in a tremendously rich Jewish family in New York. When she turned 18, she decided to see the world, so she moved to Israel, then Iraq, then France. She spent 30 years moving from country to country, burning her money away like it was unlimited, but as it turns out, trust funds are actually finite. And one day she found herself with just barely enough left to get back the US and buy a tiny house. Her family had at that point long since disowned her, so she had to get a job. Only, what do you do when you have no prior work experience, no credentials beyond high school, and you're 48 years old? Answer: housekeeping at the local Best Western, apparently, until they fire you for rocking the boat too much. She proposed a bunch of changes within her first couple of months there, most of which being rather expensive and offering no real benefit beyond I think it would look nice. Then, you drive a short bus for senior citizens until you turn the wrong way down a one-way street, panic at the sight of oncoming traffic, and steer straight into fire hydrant, then flee the scene, abandoning the company vehicle and its several now injured passengers. After that last one, she probably doesn't need to worry about room and board anymore, at least for a while. 12 years ago, I was making $95k as a software engineer. I was in an accident, suffered a brain injury, lost everything, and haven't worked as a programmer since then. My injury easily cost me $1 million. I hope thousands of people read this, then I hope they all go buy some STD Unlimited, because it helps in cases just like these. I built a business worth $3 million, had a house worth $1.4 million, investments worth more than $2 million, 4 nice cars, divorce laid me low, an ex-wife, a lawyer, and a judge stripped me of at least 3/4 of that, left me with a Miata race car, a bit of money and 51% of my company, still had to pay alimony. I gave up. I negotiated my way out of alimony by giving up more of the company, liquidated everything else, bought a boat and fricked off. 26 months later I sailed back into my life and started over. I've earned enough to live a modest retirement, and that's where I am today. Don't get married, boys. It ain't worth it. I've done it twice. The first time was a disaster. The second time was an annoyance. Just my opinion and experience. I'm way too drunk and shouldn't have posted. Anyway, there it is. I'm way too drunk. Your reasons are also the only reasons my father isn't a millionaire. Thankfully he held on to his business so he still has cash flow. Divorce however has lost him every bit of 2 million. But I will say, he can actually blame almost all of that on originally being way too drunk. He's an AA now. COVID and divorce. We were invested in a small brewery that did not make it through COVID. We had 2 rental properties generating income and vacation spots that were shut down due to COVID. Had to sell one off at a huge loss. Ex-wife then wanted a divorce and raked me over the coals. I won the other rental in the divorce and that's about it. Frick the assets. I wish I had my dang dog back. My dad had over $20 million in a business with 12 locations and 3 more opening on the way. An employee who was caught selling drugs fabricated an elaborate story that he got the drugs from my dad's company, and that the whole company was a front for the Mexican cartels. My dad spent a lot of time in Mexico back in the day and had a criminal record, so that was enough for the deed to raid him on this story. They stole all the computers, terrorized the employees, and raided every one of the locations on the same day with over 300 SWAT, including a raid on his own home. He wasn't there, just his young children. They are traumatized by it. They found nothing. Absolutely nothing. All papers in order. No indictments came. No case. Regardless, most of the employees and management quit due to the investigation. He had to close most locations and sell after less than a year at a huge loss just to pay for the lawyers to defend his case. The worst part is that they won't admit they've found nothing. They spent millions on this raid. So, they've left the case open indefinitely, making it impossible for him to work in his field. His lawyers said the prosecution has privately asked him, seriously, to find something wrong that he can plead to so they can save face. He won't lie, so they won't close the case. The government took my dad's life's work, his savings, and ruined hundreds of others' lives, and we have zero recourse. That's awful. They want him to plead to something to stave off a lawsuit for wrongful prosecution. Not me but my grandma. She started a shoe company. It became one of the biggest retails in the south part of the country. Then as her retiring days got here she passed it on to her kids who ran it to the ground. She came out of retirement and within a year she got out of debt and made it profitable again, then went back to retirement. They ran it back to the ground and even put a mortgage on her house. She let it fall and the company no longer exists. She saved her house with her saving and she lived a comfortable retirement from money on properties she owned. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.